200 acres. That's the number Jeremy Clarkson quietly removed from production this year. And it's the number nobody in farming media has actually sat with long enough to understand. Not 200 acres lost to flood. Not 200 acres lost to blight. 200 acres taken out of the ground on purpose by a man who runs the most profitable working farm on British television because the maths told him to. Everyone read the headline. Almost nobody asked the only question that matters. If the man with the cues, the Amazon deal, and the pub can't make it pay, who exactly can? Quick pause. If you're new here, hit subscribe, drop a like, and tell us in the comments which farming story you want us to dig into next. Start with the shape of the man before the shape of the crisis, because you cannot understand why this confession lands so hard without understanding who's making it. Clarkson bought diddly squat in 2008. £6 million for 1,000 acres near Chipping Norton. And for over a decade it sat there as scenery, a place to shoot, not a place to run. Then in 2019 he decided to farm it himself, and the first year's profit came back at £144. That number became a punchline. It followed him everywhere. It was supposed to be the funny, humbling start of an amateur's education. It wasn't a bad harvest. It was the industry's balance sheet, printed in real dirt, on the one farm in Britain with nothing left to hide. Here's the twist almost nobody clocks. That punchline year didn't stay a punchline. The farm shop opened with £44,000 in assets and finished its first year at $1.34 million. Diddly squat is now valued in the tens of millions. There's a pub. There's a beer brand that turned down a £50 million offer from Carlsberg. There's an Amazon contract worth £10 to £12 million a year, keeping the cameras rolling. By every visible measure, this is not a struggling farm. This is one of the most commercially successful rural operations in the country. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and like this video, and let us know in the comments what you'd want us to cover on Diddly Squat next, which is exactly why 200 empty acres should stop you cold. Loop 1 and hold on to it. Why would the most successful farmer in Britain leave a fifth of his own land doing nothing at all? Here's where it gets interesting. Clarkson didn't frame this as a failure of effort. He framed it as arithmetic. Fuel costs, fertilizer costs, machinery costs, set against the price wheat and barley would actually fetch this year. And the sum came back guaranteed negative before a single seed went into the soil. Not tight, not risky, guaranteed. He wrote, in his own words, that it is now simply impossible to make money growing food in this country. Read that twice. Not difficult, impossible. That's the reframe most coverage missed entirely. This wasn't a farmer admitting weakness. It was a farmer with the most transparent books in British agriculture, running the numbers in public and refusing to pretend they worked. Quick reminder, subscribe if you haven't already, tap like, and drop your thoughts in the comments. We read everyone. Now hold that thought next to something that happened almost the exact same week. Because this is the connection nobody in farming media has made yet. 20 days before Clarkson's column ran, Dame Angela Eagle was appointed Secretary of State for the Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, the 10th person to hold that job in a decade. 10 secretaries in 10 years? Not because British farming policy has been stable and someone kept getting promoted. Because nobody in that chair has lasted long enough to actually fix anything. The Country Land and Business Association welcomed her appointment by pointing to £22.5 billion of what they called untapped growth sitting inside. Rural Britain, investment ready to happen. If only the friction around it eased. That's the official optimism. Then, almost on top of it, the country's most watched farmer stood up and said the basic function of farming, growing food and selling it for more than it costs to grow, no longer works on 200 of his own acres. The government's own allies were describing a landscape of opportunity in the same week. The most famous data point in British agriculture was proving the opposite in real time. If you're finding this interesting so far, do us a favor and hit subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments what you think is really going on here. The council thought they had leverage once, years ago, when they tried to block Clarkson's farm shop expansion. They ended up handing him the most talked about planning dispute in British farming television. And every objection they raised became free marketing. That's the pattern with anyone who tries to control this story from the outside. The harder the institution pushes, the more it accidentally proves the point being made against it. Whitehall's tax and subsidy architecture around agriculture, tightened further by recent changes to how inheritance tax treats working farms, is now playing the same role. It isn't trying to sabotage anyone. It's simply revealing through its own numbers that the model underneath it is buckling. Here's the counterintuitive turn worth sitting with. A smallholder losing money on 200 acres would be a familiar, sad, largely invisible story, one of thousands like it every year that never make the news. Clarkson losing money on the same acreage while sitting on a pub, a brewery, a hit television show, and queues down the road is not invisible. It is the single most inconvenient piece of evidence the government could have had land on the same week it promised growth was coming. Quick one, subscribe if this is landing for you, hit like, and tell us in the comments which part of this story surprised you most. Now, here is the part that even people who follow this story closely haven't fully joined up yet. The fire fear and the fallow fields are not two separate worries from a busy news month. They are the same underlying shift, showing up twice in a matter of weeks. For 6 seasons, the threat to Diddley Squat's harvest was always the same shape: too much water, rain stopping the combine, damp grain rotting in the barn. This year, the fear flipped entirely. The ground turned so dry that Clarkson himself said the real danger wasn't rain ruining the crop. It was fire. One spark from a machine, one dropped cigarette from a walker on a footpath, and months of growth gone in minutes. A farm terrified of water for 6 years, suddenly terrified of its exact opposite, isn't two random headlines. It's one climate becoming unpredictable in both directions at once. On the same fields, in the same season, the economics quietly stopped working too. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel, like this video, and let us know in the comments what farming topic we should tackle next. Stop for a second, because this is the detail that changes everything, and almost none of the coverage joined it up. The physical risk and the financial risk aren't running on separate tracks. They're the same collapse, viewed from 2 angles: a climate too erratic to farm around safely, a cost structure that no longer rewards the effort even when the weather does cooperate. Put those together on the same 1,000 acres and you get a working farm under pressure from both directions in a single season: too dry to be safe, too expensive to be worth planting even where it would have grown. The failure isn't the story. The failure is the evidence. Quick pause for the regulars. Subscribe, like, comment below with your take. We're reading all of them. Clarkson himself reached for a comparison that's bigger than one bad year, and it's worth taking seriously rather than dismissing as a rich man being dramatic. He compared British farmland's trajectory to British manufacturing 100 years ago. In 1926, if you'd told anyone that the factories forming the backbone of the economy would have largely vanished by the 21st century, they'd have called you mad. It didn't happen through one dramatic collapse. It happened through 100 years of the arithmetic slowly stopping working, quietly, one factory at a time, until one day there simply weren't any left. His argument, stripped of the theater, is that farmland could follow the same curve, not through a single crisis making headlines once, through years exactly like this one, repeated often enough, where the rational decision on a working farm is to leave the ground empty until, eventually, there's nothing left growing at all. That is not a small claim from a man best known for driving cars into things. That's a landowner with the most transparent set of books in British agriculture, pointing at a 100-year pattern and saying he can already see its outline forming. Subscribe if you're still with us, like the video, and tell us in the comments whether you think he's right. Now stand back, because every piece connects here. 7 years ago, 144 pounds was the whole year's profit, and it became the joke that followed Clarkson everywhere. 7 years later, with a farm shop doing brisk trade, a pub, a beer brand that turned down 50 million pounds, and a television deal worth 10 to 12 million a year, he isn't reporting a small profit on 200 of his acres. He's reporting a guaranteed loss, and the rational response was to grow nothing there at all. The joke was never really on him. It was on anyone still assuming success in farming looks the way it used to. A business can win everywhere else: retail, broadcasting, hospitality, brand licensing, and still lose on the one activity the whole enterprise is nominally built around: growing food. That's the sentence that should worry anyone who thinks farming's problems are about weather, or about one man's bad year, or about a government that just needs a few more months to find its footing? One more reminder before we get to the close. Subscribe to the channel. Like this video and drop a comment. It genuinely helps more than you'd think. Here's the honest, unresolved part. Because a real story doesn't tie off with a neat bow, and pretending otherwise would insult you. Nobody currently knows whether this is a permanent structural shift in British farming economics or an unusually brutal run of a few hard years. Input costs move. Grain prices move. Governments change, and policy can shift faster than any crop cycle. Weather patterns that look catastrophic in one decade have reversed before, sometimes within a single generation. What's verified and what stands regardless of how the bigger argument resolves? Is this on this specific farm in this specific season, with this specific level of financial cushioning behind it? The arithmetic came back negative on 200 acres, and the answer was don't plant it. That is a fact from one exhaustively documented growing season. Whether it becomes the new normal is genuinely still open, and anyone telling you they know for certain either way is selling something. But here's the human truth sitting underneath all of it, and it's the reason this matters past one farm in Oxfordshire. A man with every commercial incentive to keep projecting an aspirational, sun-drenched version of British farming instead told his readers in plain language that the numbers don't work, and then left a fifth of his own land bare to prove it. You cannot manufacture that kind of admission. You can only wait for someone with nothing left to protect by hiding it and let them say it out loud. It is not a bad year. It is a live reading taken from the most watched farm in the country. At the exact moment a new government official was promising the opposite was coming. Last one before we wrap. If you've made it this far, please do subscribe, hit like, and tell us in the comments what you'd like us to break down next. It shapes what we make. If you've been finding this as interesting as we have, here's the part worth sitting with before you move on to anything else today. The fear Clarkson described was never really about fire, and it was never really about 200 bare fields. It was about a country realizing in real time on camera that the version of British farming it grew up believing in might already be quietly ending, one unplanted field, one tightened tax rule, one new Secretary of State at a time. That is not a farming story. That is a warning most of the country hasn't heard properly yet. Delivered by the one person with a microphone loud enough to make it impossible to ignore. Thank you for watching all the way through. If this one made you think differently about a story you thought you already understood, that's exactly what we're trying to do here, so subscribe, like the video, and tell us in the comments what we should cover next. We read every single one and they genuinely shape what we make. Thanks, as always, for watching.